directors, was just not given a promotion to the second year in the National School of Drama because his Hindi was not perfect. And the Indian state, which had identified with the official Hindi, the perfect Hindi, would not allow any other voice from any other part of India to be heard. Kanala came back to Imphal. He was basically a city boy who had grown up in the city of Imphal. He was being given, in a way, in reverse, his own identity. He's pushed back into his identity, which he takes on upon himself for the first time. He goes into the interiors of Manipur. He identifies with the different cultures of Manipur. In Manipur, some of you would know, several cultures have congregated. The cultures of the 9 hills around Manipur, with the different tribals, the different Nagas, the Ao Nagas, the Angana Nagas, and the different Nagas. The culture of the plains, and then the Hindu Vaishnav infiltration about 400 years ago. Different strands of culture have converged in Manipur and have created mixed cultures and also the separate identities of all these different cultures. In the rituals, in the music, in the dance, in their sounds, in their bodies, in their acting skills, very different languages, the different layers. You can read these, you can see these even now. He discovered these for the first time after his rejection from the National School of Drama. And Kanandal came up with a theatre of his own. And the beginnings of a new, indigenous, original Manipuri theatre. In 1973, I saw his work for the first time. It was a play called Kabui Ke Yoiba. It is one of those fairy tales that are very common in different parts of India, in different forms and variants. 7 strong brothers and a sister that they love so much. The play begins with the 7 strong brothers going out to work, and as they leave their home, they tell their sister, their only sister, to open the gates only if a particular song, the Kabui Ke Yoiba song, is sung. And they sing the song. A soft, lilting, moving song. And then they go away, the gates are closed. A Rakshasa is around, and every day somebody has to be given from every family to the Rakshasa. Every family, almost every family has given one or another from itself. Nobody has dared charge these 7 strong brothers, they're so strong. This particular day, an old woman, a sickly, thin old woman, she is chosen and offered to the Rakshasa. And the Rakshasa brings her onto the stage. And this role was performed by perhaps the greatest living actress of our country, Vaishnam Savitri. A wonderful actress. Savitri was playing the role of this old woman, and the old woman tells the Rakshasa, I'm old and thin. What will you get out of my flesh? There's this young girl within. Why don't you grab her? You just have to sing this song, and she will come out and you can devour her. The Rakshasa desperately tries to learn the song. His lust, his greed, she can't. It's a match, a kind of a slanging match that goes on with the 2 songs, or rather the same song being sung by this woman and sung by the Rakshasa, whose hoarse, gruff voice can't capture the limit of the song. he becomes desperate. He tries to grab the woman, and the woman again sings the song. Till the point comes when he manages to learn the song, he sings it, the gate opens, he grabs and snatches the young woman away. There's a moment's silence. The 7 brothers come back. The gate open. They realize what has happened. They sing the Kabui Kayoiba song once again. Sadly, like a mourning song, like a dirge. And even as they're singing that song, with a deep realization that you can't save your own people if you isolate yourself from the people. If you try to save just your own home, you can't save your own home. You have to save all the homes of the community. That way lies your freedom and your safety and your security and your life. Even as they're trying to realize that and sing that mournful song, somebody from the audience, obviously an actor, who suddenly very cynically stands up and says, "Why this mourning and whining? We can't take it, we're not interested." And then this actor literally jumps from the stage down to the auditorium, jumps about, leaps about 2 rows of the front seats, grabs this spectator, drags him up onto the stage, flings him down there, and then says, "So this is what you want." And all the 7, they changed the same song, the same Kabui Kayoiba song, into the vulgar tunes of a Bombay commercial hit song of the period. And they sing it, and they dance to it, and say, "This is what you want." And at this point, you hear the scream of that woman, and you realize that the Rakshasa has had his way. This is where he began, and I'll close with a reference to Kanailal's response to the killing of Manorama, the killing that provoked Iram Sharmila to begin her fast. He produced his version of Mahashweta Devi's story, Draupadi, which is about a tribal woman, Dopti Mechen, in northern Bengal, who is tortured by the Indian police. And then, when the next morning, the character, the police chief called the Sena Nayaka in the story, he calls for this woman. She comes up naked and she tells this man, "I don't have any reason to be ashamed before you. You're shame personified. I defy you." And the story ends with Sena Nayaka threatened, overpowered by the nakedness of the protesting woman. This is a play which Kanailal staged, with Draupadi being played by Savitri once again, and Savitri stripping for that final scene. Exactly 4 months before the historic demonstration by the 13 Manipuri women who stripped and stood before the fortress of the Assam Rifles in the heart of Imphal and held up a poster saying, "Indian Army, rape us." A protest against the state, a protest against capital, a protest against the propaganda of the media, and a protest which was triggered off by an act of theatre 4 years ago. Nothing like this has happened in our country in any other part, where a theatre sparks off a form of militancy and a form which changes things. Kangla Fort, incidentally, the place where the Assam Rifles had set up its camp, had been the site of the old palace of the Manipur kings. It had also the first Vaishnava temple after the Vaishnavas had come to Manipur. That is also there. The Kangla Fort was also the site where in the first historic encounter between the Manipuri Raj and the British Army. The Manipuris had condemned 4 British officers to death for their treachery and hanged them. And next year the British had come back and hanged the Prince of Manipur, the great Yuvaraj Tikendrajit, and 3 other heroes of Manipuri revolutionary lore. The Kangla Fort is the site of Manipur's history, Manipur's revolutionary aspirations, Manipur's religion, Manipur's old independent power, and all this had been occupied for over 25 years by the Indian Army, which had set up a camp there into which Manipuris could not enter, till this massive protest led by these 13 women, inspired by an act of theatre. 2 years later, when I went back to Imphal, I found that the Indian Army had removed its camp from the Kangla Fort. A triumph of culture. Thank you.
मैं अर्शद को आमंत्रित करता हूँ कि आएं और इस लेक्चर का सार संक्षेप प्रस्तुत करें। उसके बाद हम लोग 15 मिनट संवाद का डायलॉग का एक सत्र होगा, जिसमें उनसे संवाद किया जा सकता है। अर्शद
ने जो कहा 3 पैराग्राफ में मैंने संक्षेप में लिखा है। जैसे जैसे राज्य, पूंजी और मीडिया का गठजोड़ जनतंत्र और जनता की आवाज को दबाने की कोशिश कर रही है, वैसे वैसे संस्कृति और उसकी स्वायत्तता को बचाना उतना ही जरूरी हो गया है। भारतीय विविधता को किसी एक राष्ट्रीय संस्कृति में समाहित करना संभव नहीं। संस्कृतियों में से मेरा आशय वैसी स्मृतियों और कार्यप्रणालियों से है जिसे लोकल भाषाएं और बोलियां अपने में समाहित रखती हैं। ये स्मृतियां अपने आप में प्रतिरोध की कई भाषाएं व्यक्त करती हैं। इन स्मृतियों से बना इतिहास सांस्कृतिक पूंजी का निर्माण करता है, जो कि अपने समय के स्वरूप को अभिव्यक्ति देता है। भूमंडलीकरण के नाम पर राज्य और पूंजी का गठजोड़ विविध संस्कृतियों को खत्म करके एक रूपी उपभोक्ता समाज का निर्माण करने में लगा हुआ है, ताकि एक ही तरह का सामान इस मार्केट में आसानी से बेचा जा सके। उपभोक्तावाद केवल भौतिकता के इर्द गिर्द ही नहीं बन रहा था, बल्कि बड़ी सहजता से राजनीतिक और सांस्कृतिक विचारों को भी उपभोग की वस्तु में बदल देता है। इस बदलाव का एक प्रमुख माध्यम मीडिया है, जो कि न्यूज और संस्कृति को लोकल दर्शकों के लिए एक उपभोग की वस्तु की तरह परोसती है। संस्कृति के इस औद्योगिकरण के खिलाफ लोकल संस्कृति को बचाने की लड़ाई एक एजेंडा की तरह ही लिया जाना चाहिए। प्रोफेसर बंदोपाध्याय ने कहा कि यद्यपि पश्चिम बंगाल में यह प्रोजेक्ट ध्वस्त होने के करीब है, लेकिन मणिपुर कुछ उम्मीदें जगाता है। इस संदर्भ में उन्होंने कहा कि रविन्द्रनाथ टैगोर और प्रोग्रेसिव राइटर्स एसोसिएशन के अनेकों लेख हमें एक अलग एजेंडा बनाने का रास्ता दिखाते हैं। थैंक यू।
प्रोफेसर समीक से अपने सवाल रख सकते हैं, संवाद कर सकते हैं। 15 मिनट का हम लोगों के पास समय है।
Could you please also narrate or tell us few more interesting and important stories like Kanhai Lal and his association and his intelligence to bring politics, people and culture in a web?
My name is Sandeep, and my question to you is talk about in context of Indian culture, the real base of civilization and culture are destroying or dismantling due to the globalization and liberalization. Why we people can't resist this kind of infiltration and this kind of change will change our real identity. So we can't deny the cultural imperialism. So we can't deny this kind of cultural imperialism.
Second question first, and then go back to. I didn't elaborate on that, but that was there in this summary that I'd handed out, and that was translated into Hindi. It's part of globalization, it's part of the politics of globalization to create a common single market for all commodities. That makes the production process more successful. The production process demands that there is one single common market. To create this single common market, you have to create a single common kind of taste, so that all people, particularly in an extremely plural country like India, where there are so many histories, so many memories that are distinguishing and separating and identifying cultures all over the country. No state in India, I think, has a single culture. It has so many cultures within it and so many layers. Now, the more you can smoothen out all these differences, destroy all these differences, you can break down the consolidation of these communities, the meeting points, the convergences of these communities, and standardize it. Make their tastes, make their demands, make their aspirations the same. And then just provide whatever you want to give them. And even these desires are being constructed by the media every moment. The kind of images, the kind of stories, the kind of success models that are being sold to us through the media, through all its agencies, the channels, the press, all of these together, with capital behind it and the state behind it. So it's such a massive construction that unless there are points and sites of resistance at different points, it is almost like the guerrilla movements in Vietnam, where the consolidated American power, the massive arms apparatus of America, broke down under the pincer attacks from the different points by the guerrilla groups in Vietnam. And that defeat of US imperialism in Asia, which remains a model. And that should be the model also for the cultural resistance to imperialism through consumerism. That is the point that I was trying to make. Now, I find the Manipuri experience so exciting, and I have been watching it for all these years. Every year I go to Manipur and I have opportunities of watching this work. But at different levels and different scales, not to that extent. There have been similar movements in Karnataka, for example, in the emergency years, where again, when there was a resistance to the emergency in Karnataka at one level, and there were people dying of fasts in prison during the emergency. At the same time, there were also groups, traveling groups, as they were called, the Jathas. They would travel and they would perform in small places throughout Karnataka. And once again, these movements, or these consolidations of cultural activity or cultural activism, they cannot be things that can just be planted or imported from us. So you don't have to create a new institution or a new organization to host these groups. It is a system. It has been there. So a different kind of group activity enters that scenario, enters that loop, that practice loop. And this made great use, and one of the first states to topple the Congress rule after the emergency was, of course, Karnataka, in a very vibrant manner. And that had to do with a lot of that campaign that went on throughout the emergency. So this would be another instance, and once again, where you draw upon the culture and the tradition of the place. For example, in Manipur also. Manipur, you should know, is a matriarchal community even now. Manipuri women have a great history of what they call, there is a whole term in Manipuri language called women's battles. Nupi Lans. Nupi is woman, Lan is battle. There's a whole history of Nupi Lans. So this was another Nupi Lan. But a Nupi Lan which captures its image of protest from theatre. So there is a convergence of practice, tradition, memory, and new theatre, which is completely new theatre. This hadn't ever happened in theatre in Manipur. So these connections, and only when there is a connection, something happens. As it has happened in Manipur, happened in Karnataka. And I don't see much of it happening in the rest of the country in a very significant manner at the present moment. There is a lull, there is a kind of a decline, there is a kind of a surrender to this consolidation of forces at the moment. Let's face that reality, and there lies the need to speak about these memories and speak about these histories once again, to recall them,